and Social Services Ombudsman. Right now, if you are a child in the foster care system, a foster family, or a parent who is attempting to navigate health and welfare, your only recourse if you have a complaint or a concern is to file it with the department itself. This process has resulted in a series of, frankly, horrendous outcomes for some of these children and these families, as these complaints have not been listened to over the months and years. In the course of doing the research for this bill, the stories that I heard of teenagers being punished for daring to raise questions about their living conditions, for foster families being charged with potential claims of sexual predation, it is heartbreaking that this system that is intended to protect children and to help families come together is instead working against the very individuals within the system. This office is intended to provide an independent body that allows for complaints to be reviewed in their entirety, that allows for any concerns related to unequal or ill treatment to be addressed in a meaningful way and to not be swept aside or ignored. The creation of this office is a net neutral as it relates to the state's budget. The FTP and funding for this office will be pulled out of the Department of Health and Welfare, as you'll see on the fiscal note. The Office of the Ombudsman will operate independently, but that doesn't mean they operate without accountability. The independence matters because that means there's not outside pressure as it relates to them adjudicating the complaints that they receive. But if they exceed the bounds of the authority under the duties and responsibilities that are outlined in this legislation, we will have every right to act to ensure that they are operating in the way that was intended with this legislation. They will have responsibility for hearing complaints from a range of individuals who are associated with any child within the system. The child themselves will be able to file a complaint if they can voice a complaint. There is also the ability for foster parents, adoptive parents, and other biological relatives to speak up in the name of a child that's within the system. There's also the opportunity for any legally appointed guardian, an attorney, and or any member of this body or the body across the rotunda. In essence, we are setting up a situation where we can actually advocate for the children and the families that are within this system in a way that allows for there to be accountability and transparency for the services that are provided. I don't pursue this action lightly, and I know that there are members of this body that believe it doesn't go far enough. And I agree, it does not go far enough. But for the children and the families who are in this system, this is a ray of hope for them. This is an opportunity for their voices to be heard. And this is the way forward for them to feel like they can have the wrongs done to them righted. As I have met with the children and the families who find themselves in this situation, what I hear most consistently is no one is listening. This office provides a way for us to listen and to act and to help prevent the maltreatment that's been happening within this system to children and families from going on. I want to do more. I know this body wants to do more, but I would ask that you please join with me in taking this first step to restoring accountability and transparency in our foster services. I'd ask for your green light, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, lady. For the motions, for the debate on the motion. Good lady for 33.
Mr. Speaker, would the good lady stand for a question?
Lady for 34 yield to a question.
Lady yields.
Lady yields.
Mr. Speaker, good lady, not trying to put you on the spot. Currently, if we have, and I know part of this answer, but I don't know all of it. Currently, if we have a complaint, do you know the process that we currently have to go through to register that complaint?
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, I can't speak in detail to it, but at a general level, the complaint is filed with the department itself and is adjudicated internally within the department.
Lady 33.
Thank you. To debate the bill.
Lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Mr. Speaker, friends, this, in my opinion, is a great first step, and I'm going to tell you why. I have huge consternation with what's happening with our kids. I'm dealing with it in my community, and I'll bet you're dealing with it in your community. You may not know it. The Department of Health and Welfare is acting as judge, jury, and executioner. there's no accountability. And when I say that, I know I'm generalizing. Maybe I should get more specific to CPS, and the good lady to my left has done a heck of a lot of work to try to bring some of this to light. And you may feel what you feel, but I'm telling you what, the numbers prove out. The CPS will go in and get, of all the kids they take, 80% shouldn't have been touched. And we do more harm by going in and taking those kids out of the home than leaving them. There needs to be a means where some of these parents, they end up with trying to get their kids back for 6 months, a year. The damage that's done in the meantime is terrible. Now, you may say, well, if we save just one kid, I disagree. If we damage 80% of the kids, that's wrong. So I don't know if this is it. I don't know if this is the answer. But before you just vote no, think on this. When I was coaching at BYU, we had an athletic director that said something that was profoundly impactful to me. And you've heard it in its many different forms. It was Rondo Fehlberg, and he said, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. So I'm suggesting that we try changing, and we hold someone accountable for what's happening with our kids.
Thank you, lady, for the motions. For debate on the motion. Lady 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if the good lady would yield to a question.
So lady 34 yield to a question.
The lady yields.
They yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and good lady. I'm just trying to understand why we're creating a new office instead of using the Office of Administrative Hearings, which is already, as I understand it, set up to hear appeals from everything except maybe the Department of Water Resources.
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, that avenue was explored. And what we discovered is that the process that's used for the purposes of administrative hearings differed enough from what we were looking at doing as it relates to complaints and the process associated with filing a complaints and reviewing the complaints, that it went beyond the scope of what the office was intended for when it was created. So we would have had to expand the scope of authority that was allowed for the office in order to maintain this particular office.
Thank you, lady. For debate on the motion. Lady 17.
To declare a conflict under Rule 80 because I serve as a volunteer guardian ad litem. That is a mouthful.
Good lady, you're full of surprises today. Declarations are noted, and we appreciate what you do with the ad litem program.
Thank
Good
you.
lady from 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Lady has the floor to debate the bill.
I thought I'd just give a couple of experiences that I've had in the last 4 months or so to kind of color what we're talking about here. First of all, we've got good friends at home who've been foster parents for decades and have actually adopted their foster care kids at one point in time. There was a complaint made against our friend, and the department timed it so that she got to spend Christmas in jail. That's the kind of thing that happens. Additionally, I'm trying to work with a young lady who's about to turn 18 to try to figure out a path forward for her. She's always in conflict with her current social worker, her caseworker, and she was told, and we have it on tape from the department official, that they, regardless of any conflicts that she has with her caseworker, they don't tend to change them in the department. So that's what's going on. It's a serious issue. We need to do something about it. I know that everybody has some idea of what that needs to look like, but I think this is our best path forward right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, ladies. For debate on the motion, gentleman 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
I recognize the issues we have here with this. It seems like in many ways it's out of control, but to establish an individual that is independent of the legislature, what is that, page 3, line 3, independent of the legislature, courts, Department of Health and Welfare, to whom is this individual responsible? Now, would the good lady stand for a question, Mr. Speaker?
Would lady 34 yield to the question?
The lady will yield.
Lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady, why are we giving such broad independence for this individual?
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good gentlemen, I would encourage you to think about independence in terms of operations, not independent from accountability. So ultimately, what we're trying to get at the heart at is there are pressures that have, under the existing system, that don't encourage a transparent and or accountable process for the individuals within that system, because ultimately is reflective of the individuals. You know, to the point of the good lady from District 33 that mentioned this idea of judge, jury, and executioner, we're trying to move outside of the system to provide a neutral court, so to speak, that allows for a review of what's happened. Because right now, the only two avenues that are available to participants within the system is to submit a complaint to the department or a complaint to the courts. And we all know that the court systems can be incredibly complicated to navigate. This is an interim step that allows for adjudication of an issue that is related to someone who is a recipient of foster care services. And so if the concern that has been expressed, that I've heard from several, is this idea of, well, independence means we can't control them. I think this body has ably demonstrated multiple times during the session that we are more than happy to exert control when needed if we feel that there are agencies or entities that are acting under our authority that have gone beyond the bounds of what's acceptable. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with us to ensure they're not acting outside the duties and responsibilities outlined in this legislation.
Gentleman 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, good lady. Continue my debate.
Cut the budget. That's what you've done to PBS and others.
Thank you.
In the future, be careful. You need to probably ask the questions before we end debate, go in the middle, but that's okay. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Would you clarify that, Mr. Speaker?
Well, it's kind of concerning when we start debating and then we come up with a question in our head and then ask the question and then ask to continue to debate.
Okay,
Personally, as Speaker, I would rather have them separate.
Okay.
I don't care if you ask your question after your debate either, because questions don't count as debate, but it kind of messes, in my opinion, I don't like it that way.
Thank you, Mr.
Personal
Speaker.
opinion of the Speaker.
I will end. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You gentlemen, you can continue debate if you want. Don't. Okay. Further debate on the motion.
Power of the
Lady
Speaker.
from 9.
Been there 26 years in the same legislative seat.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker,
Mr.
to
Moore.
debate against the bill.
Lady has the floor to debate the motion.
26 years.
We just voted to get rid of a government entity, and here we are creating a new government entity that we all know the intent is really, really good. There's obviously a problem with the foster care system and what's happening and no oversight, but this is a Department of Welfare, Health and Welfare problem. Why are we creating a new agency to correct another agency or have oversight? Why can't we just fix the problem instead of creating a new agency? And we open the door again to more spending, more employees. It's just typical of government to open a door, create a new program, and the program just continues to grow. And then the appropriations are larger, and it's this whole monster that just continues to grow and grow. And for that reason, I will be a red light.
Just got a call from the governor, eh?
Further debate on the motion. Good lady from 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate for the bill.
The lady has the floor to debate the motion.
Thank you very much. I sat in on the committee hearing about this. This is a way to protect the most vulnerable kids and those people who have offered to be their foster parent. What is happening right now is retaliation. If those foster parents even squeak that something is not correct or something is going wrong. We heard about a young child whose father was sexually abusing her, and the foster parent did not want that father to have any kind of contact that wasn't supervised. But Health and Welfare knew better and let him take her into the bathroom where he sexually abused that child again. This kind of thing is unacceptable. This is not a new program. This is protecting children using an existing FTE taken away from the department with the money taken away from the department. This is the only way to get a handle on this. We can't just keep going down the path of kicking the ball down the road, saying health and welfare, clean up your own act. They do not clean up their own act. Some of you will remember an unfortunate thing that happened, a very unfortunate thing that happened a few years ago with a social worker who refused to go into a home on a well child check. Continually refused to go into this home when the father was frantic because the stepfather was cruelly abusing a little boy, jumping on him with his knee into this child's chest until he killed that child. And then the mother and the stepfather pretended like the little boy had run away or someone had taken him. These people are just horrendous as far as I'm concerned. I had to go to court once on a premature baby that parents were abusing, a tiny, fragile little baby, because the social worker wouldn't go into the home. I went into the home and was appalled and disgusted and sickened how this baby was being treated. So to me, this is the only way we're going to actually get a handle on this agency finally. So please vote for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. For the vote of motion. Lady from 11.
I know you couldn't see me because I dressed so, yeah.
Well, this is the good eye, but I missed a bunch on this side. So
you're trying to be even-handed, I can tell, to debate the bill.
Lady has the floor.
This is one of the reasons why fiscal notes, why we have to put a statement of purpose and fiscal note on these. And I would just direct you to look at it. Not only is it not just one FTP, it's 3 that get transferred over. And then it tells you exactly what it includes, the $325,000 for personnel, $125,000 for operations, and $20,000 for capital outlay. From where? The Department of Health and Welfare. So it's not adding; it's taking away and moving it to somewhere, just like some do with policemen, to have ombudsmen, so to look at things and to have a more objective look. So it's not going to add. It just transfers. So look at your fiscal note because it actually lays it all out. Thanks. Vote yes.
Thank you, ladies. For the debate on the motion, good lady from 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Should briefly debate in favor of the bill.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. I serve on the committee that this came through. I'm not going to share the details, but we heard very extensive testimony, I think unanimously in support of this bill. And I'm not going to give you the details of the horrific stories we heard from foster kids and parents who had suffered terrible things with nobody to help them in the system. But needless to say, we all needed the box of Kleenex at our chairs by the time that hearing was over. We badly need this bill, and I hope you'll give 1380 your green light.
Thank you, lady. Jump 2.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill briefly.
Someone has the floor to debate the motion.
I know that this is a highly emotional subject with kids, and I've had some personal experiences in this area. But what I don't understand is we keep talking in the context of this bill about health and welfare as it's this obscure thing. All these stories I hear of these tragedies were connected to people who made horrific decisions, and yet they still have their job. I'm very confused. If we want to fix this system, it seems like we could have removed lots of FTPs by removing people who make bad decisions that harm children. Now, instead, we're going to take positions from health and welfare, create a new position, which is usually elected. Ombudsman is usually an elected position. And we're going to give them superior power that answers to basically no one. They have the right to subpoena, and we keep talking about how they'll be able to move for parents and foster parents against the system. It goes both ways. They will also be able to move against parents, because it says that anybody who impedes their duties is guilty of a crime. This is a very powerful thing we're about to do. And I don't think that appointing government to manage government, I haven't seen that work yet. So I will be a no on this. Thank you.
Thank you for being a no. I was abused in the Boy Scouts, I can tell you. that they don't want anybody to know.
Would the lady yield to a question?
Lady yield for the question.
Lady yields.
Lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. And I should know this. I apologize. I don't. Who's in charge of this committee or this ombudsman? Is it appointed by the governor? Is it elected? What's that position?
Late third form.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, it resides within the governor's office under those independent offices, those self-governing agencies. So it is a gubernatorial appointment with Senate confirmation required.
There were 150 boys that were abused by a sex predator at Island Park, Idaho at the Boy Scout camp.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. In the process of this bill,
the boys
did
had
you
reported,
do any research on the
they
Child
didn't do anything
Protective
about it.
Legislative Oversight Committee that this body has set up? Did any of that
and that's what this
information
agency
come
is going
up
to do.
when you were researching this
It'll
legislation?
be reported to the governor, and they will
Mr. Speaker
decide.
and good lady, yes, it did. And in fact,
one of the legislators
prior
who might
actions that were
abuse
taken related to that particular group
student,
were what helped shape
or
some of where we move forward with this.
the governor will know
that
about
particular
it.
group is
And he'll
empowered to
decide what
collect
to do.
information. They don't have any authority to act on it. And so the expectation is that not only would this group be able to provide information to the ombudsman as well, but it would close that loop on the concerns about we have this group collecting information related to children. We don't necessarily have anywhere to go with it. Now that loop has been closed and the information can be passed on from the committee to the ombudsman to take action.
Take action?
Thank you. To testify against the bill.
Lady has the floor to make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe there's good intentions here, but as the good lady from 33 said, I'm not sure that this is the answer. This is not the answer to fix what we have going on in this state. Up north, it's kind of a joke. You want a child? Befriend a social worker. That irritates me. That angers me. But that's what they say up north. I have talked to family after family. I'm aware right now of 2 cases that the parents have raised so much money to fight, and they've gone to court and they've won against the state after 2 or 3 years of trying to not have their child there and having to fight the state on this. We have a huge problem in health and welfare, and the problem nobody seems to be talking about is the gentleman on the second floor is in charge of that agency, and he's going to be in charge of this agency, and nothing has been done to address these issues. I have read child protective cases and seen lies within them, and there's no accountability. I have recommended to some families that maybe they need to file a kidnapping charge because I see no reason why their child was taken from them. There is a huge problem, and we do have a solution for this. We have a legislative oversight committee that we have set up that we can give ourselves the authority to address these issues, to have get more in depth to these problems. It's a reoccurring problem. If I haven't shared enough of the problem, I have also seen a trend in this agency that's targeting ex-drug addicts or anyone that has a child that maybe has a disability because there's more money in the system for those type of children. And so when you have incentives built within the system, you can do an ombudsman all day long, but it is not going to fix the heart of this problem, which is we have bad people in these positions. Now, most of these social workers are straight out of college. So it's not like they have families of their own. They're in their 20s and 30s, and there's a huge problem within the system. I agree, but I do not think this is the fix because it is under the same management as this whole agency is. And until this body gets serious about addressing this, we're going to continue to get the calls and to continue to have the issues. It was brought up, the Office of the Administrative Hearing. That is an agency, it's a newer agency to the state. It is an agency where we could put this, where these families could go to a neutral site and bring their stories ahead in front of government bureaucrats and maybe get a better answer. But to do it to an ombudsman that is accountable to the very person who is in charge of the whole health and welfare, we're not going to get anywhere with this. And for that, I'm a red light. And I just ask that, you know, I can tell you just as many sad stories. We need to do something. Let's do something that's actually going to work for these families and these children. And I'm begging you to just vote no on this.
Good on you.
For debate on the motion, gentleman 15.
A point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor for point of order.
Is it appropriate to label fellow state employees as being bad people in this during debate?
It's probably not the best thing to do, but it happens sometimes. More often than not.
Is it okay to continue doing that?
If you would like to do it, you can badmouth them too, good gentlemen. It's part of the debate. Late 17.
To debate in favor of the bill.
You going to badmouth people? Good lady has the floor.
I'm going to try not to badmouth anybody. As a volunteer guardian ad litem, one of the things that happens every week is a newsletter comes to your email, and it tells all of the guardian ad litems in that region about all of the kids who are ready for a guardian ad litem, and that's how we volunteer to take on a case. And every week there are 5 or 10 kids in this region, I'm in Ada County, who are ready for a guardian ad litem. We're all volunteers. We do it for the passion and for the kids. So while I understand the debate about money and where it's spent and is it a transfer or is it new or whatever, but we can't wait another year. And it's my understanding, being a newbie, that we're hoping that this is one of our last weeks here in this building. And those kids can't wait another interim to have this ombudsman. The parents can't wait another year. They're in dire need now. So I encourage your green light.
Good ladies for the debate on the motion. Hearing none. Oh, gentlemen, we've got 2 of them over here. Sorry, gentleman 7.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, would the good lady from 34 stand for question?
Lady yields a question.
Lady yields.
Lady yields.
Yeah, as it pertains to page 5, lines 21 through 27, if I had a constituent come to me and ask for help with this ombudsman in place, and me not being knowledgeable enough, if I was to go to the chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee and ask for him to intervene and ask questions on behalf, would we be in violation of lines 21 through 27?
Good lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good gentlemen, no.
Good gentleman, for the debate on motion. Good gentleman 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to applaud the good lady for bringing this bill because it's clearly brought.
Would the good gentleman like to debate the bill?
I would like to debate the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the motion.
I would again like to applaud the lady's efforts in bringing this bill because clearly it's done out of concern, and I think universally nobody wants to see abusive children. I mean, it's a horrible subject. The question is, how do we fix it? Because obviously Health and Social Services is not doing its job. Now, I would suggest that creating another office, an ombudsman, would actually shield Health and Social Services from doing its job. Because what happens is you have the attitude now of people that, okay, they've made complaints to us. Well, we're not going to hear the complaints. Let them just go to the ombudsman. We'll worry about that down the road. We're not going to do anything about it now. It's a really bad idea. And what we're doing is we are absolutely expanding government. There's no question about it. Now, we're just moving money at this point from one area to another. We're moving three FTPs to create this new office. Guaranteed this office is going to grow in the future. There's no question about it. And is it going to be any more effective than what's going on right now? The issue is that there is abuse in the process. It is not working for the people it's supposed to take care of. We have to hold the agencies responsible for their jobs. If you don't do your job, you need to be fired. It's as simple as that. That's what happens in private industry, and that's what needs to happen in government. It's the only way we're going to control what we do and take care of the people that we're supposed to be taking care of. If you're not doing your job, if people are being abused under your watch, if children are being abused, my God, if children are being abused, do something about it by going to the people who are responsible for taking care of them. I'm going to be a red light on this.
For debate on the motion. Good lady 2.
Will the lady yield to another question?
Good lady 34 yield to a question.
Lady yields.
Lady yields. That surprises me.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. I do have a question on page 5 that this language, what I'm concerned about is we've had a couple incidents where children were wrongly taken and people protested. And how is that going to play? Sometimes it's the only way to get government's attention when people peacefully protest. And I'm afraid, what's that going to look like with this new system?
Good lady from 34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, the process remains the same. Any challenge, so if there's an impediment or retaliation, would have to be adjudicated through the court system. Due process is required. This does not empower this office to be the adjudicator of whether or not this action has happened. It is still required to go through the courts. So any other action that you would anticipate having to be reviewed as it relates to
more jobs for
state statute, the courts would have to rule on that. It's not the office's decision whether you impede it or not. The courts would have to make that determination.
Lady from 2.
Follow up.
Good lady yield to additional question.
The lady yields.
Lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good lady. What I'm concerned about is a lot of times until this becomes public, nothing gets done. And there's problems within the system until it's brought to light. Just light will shine on what's going on. And so my question is, would an article exposing bad actors in health and welfare or a bad, maybe a perceived what's happening within health and welfare, could that be looked at in this language as interference?
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, no. Impeding requires that you actually interfere with the ability underlined with the duties and responsibilities that are in the statute. An article, as you have described in your question, does not interfere with their ability to carry out their duties and responsibilities.
Okay.
Lady 2. For debate on the motion. Lady 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and good body. I just want to
Would you like to debate the bill?
I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to debate in favor of the bill.
Lady has the floor. Debate in favor of the bill.
As we can remember and recall, we have a series of incidents that have happened over decades with our Native American friends and their children who were in boarding schools. Over 500 have been documented. If there was an ombudsman that these children could have gone to that was not connected to that particular group, maybe we wouldn't have 500 deaths and graves that these people go to visit. So I know that we are concerned. We want to keep our government as small as possible. I see this as a transfer from one to another, that the funds are coming from one to another, and that's why it's neutral. I would like to see this body pass this bill, and let's look at it in another 2 years. Give it a couple of years. Let's see what it can do. We pass bills all the time in the hopes that it is going to do something positive. This is for children. This is to protect the most vulnerable in our society. I have a constituent in my hometown that had a disabled child who was over 18, came to Boise to live in a program through health and welfare to try to bring these folks to a place where they can possibly live in maybe a group home. It turned out there was substantial abuse, giving alcohol to these disabled children, and So I am in agreement. There are a lot of problems, but this is a step that we can look at, a step that we can come back and fix if we don't think it is
always come back
going
and
to
always
work.
be different people, except for Moyle. And
I beg of you to think of the children and not the fact that you are worried that this is growing government.
Moms,
because sometimes
Guthrie,
we have to look at the bigger picture than just a number, a growing government. Please think of the children.
Think of the children.
Your situations in your hometowns.
You're legislating morality
and
here.
push the green line. Thank you.
You can't legislate morality.
For the debate on the motion, good lady from 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the lady from 34 yield to a question?
Lady yield to a question.
Lady yields.
Lady yields.
Thank you. So can you tell me exactly where this says that this is going to correct the situation that's going on in health and welfare? And can you tell me what kind of process and how long that would take?
34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, let me take a stab at seeing if I can answer your question. So this process sets up an office, and the ombudsman is directed to set up a way for folks to submit complaints, right? So that will be the first step for the individual in this office. Once a complaint is received, then the ombudsman works through the review and examination of that complaint. That may entail requesting documentation from the department itself. It may require requesting documentation from other sources who are involved in the case of the particular child in question. Then that review process allows the ombudsman to put together all of those pieces and make an assessment based on the complaint that's been filed as to whether or not there is merit to the complaint. Now, I would direct your attention to pages 4 and 5, where it explicitly says on page 4, lines 5 through 8, if there's reason to believe that there is maltreatment that has resulted in death or serious physical injury that has, jeopardized life, health, or safety, they need to report it to law enforcement. So that would be the next sort of official step based on the results of the review, is if they found evidence of that, it would be reported to law enforcement. The same is true if you look on page 5. If the ombudsman suspects, and this is on lines 5 and 6, that an individual has committed a crime in the course of their review, again, that needs to be relayed to the proper authorities for adjudication. So if you're looking for sort of the process of how this works, the ombudsman receives the complaint, they collect the evidence, they do the review, and then based on the outcome of that review, then they can respond accordingly if there is a need to make a criminal referral or a professional referral as it relates to administrative rules and laws within the state.
Lady 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Follow up.
This is a good lady from 34. Yield to additional question.
Lady yields.
Lady yields.
What kind of time frame are we looking at? Is this going to be a month-long process, year-long process? Are these children staying in these situations while this review is going on? I guess that's my question.
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, that's going to depend upon the type of complaint. You'll note that there's no other legislation that puts a specific time frame or time limit on when a complaint can be submitted or the review process for it. Because again, if there's complexity, it may take longer as opposed to a easier to review complaint that relates to an issue that happened with an interaction between a social worker and a foster child. I would say that given if you're dealing with the potential that there is harm to the child involved, that there would be the pursuit as fast as possible, but we don't normally stipulate very specific timeframes on a review process because, again, this is not establishing criminal liability. This is essentially just a review process for the potential purposes of referral to the courts if there's something is found, evidence is found.
Lady 4. For debate on the motion. Hearing none, with the good lady 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just wondering if the good lady from 34 would yield to one more question.
The lady yield to an additional question.
The lady yields so long as the body doesn't mind me answering another question.
Lady yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good lady. There's just one part of this that I'm really struggling with, and I'm hoping that you can help me. I've never seen before in statute a situation where we create an executive entity and then we stipulate that they're going to operate independent of the legislature and of the courts. I can understand the purpose of this language in directing that they're going to operate independent of the Department of Health and Welfare, because that's what we're looking for, is a check and balance on their authority. But I'm really struggling with the idea of establishing that they operate independent of the legislature and the courts, and what the purpose or benefit of that language is.
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good lady, so the idea of setting up an independent office was weighed carefully. We went and we looked at other models in other states and found that there were 14 other states that have these independent offices set up to function separate from other state entities. Those states include Georgia, Indiana, Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, West Virginia. And the independence is there for the purposes to isolate them from influence and the potential fear of, if I act in a certain way, I'm potentially putting my job at risk, which is what happens under the current system of having the complaints go into the department. You're essentially asking someone to, raise the red flag on themselves. In this instance, by creating that independence and separation from other entities, we're allowing them the room to truly be an independent voice for foster families and children.
Lady 30.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
He has the floor. Debate the motion.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker and good ladies and gentlemen, I understand the value of what we're talking about here. But I also have grave concern about the idea that we are insulating them from a check and balance by the legislature or the courts, if that is the purpose of this language. And so for that purpose, I will be a red light on this.
Thank you, ladies, for debate on the motion. Gentleman 3.
To debate a second time, Mr. Speaker.
Is there anybody who wishes to debate the motion for the first time? Gentleman has the floor to debate the bill for the second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The thoughts that come to my mind are, if we have an independent operating individual, how are we going to have rules that are going to have anything to do with what they do and how they do it? Doesn't every agency need rules to implement our statutes? This is just evidences that the legislature has an inability to have any influence over the behavior of the health and welfare. And by creating this, we're tacitly admitting that. So it's just, I mean, no one is, everybody recognizes there's a serious problem here in terms of the behemoth that we're addressing with respect to health and welfare. But we have got to be able to reach in and fix the problem rather than creating something separate and allow the problem to continue or fester within the agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentlemen. Is there anybody who wishes to debate the bill for the second time? Gentleman 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wondered if the good lady would yield to a question.
Would the lady yield to an additional question from the gentleman from 4?
Lady yields.
The lady yields.
Thank you. Good lady, my question is, we're transferring 3 FTPs from Department of Health and Welfare to this Ombudsman department. Is there a concurrent reduction in the health and welfare budget?
Lady 34.
Mr. Speaker and good gentlemen, there will be a concurrent reduction in the event that this bill passes. So as the current health and welfare budget stands, they still have the FTP and the funds. But in the event that this passes and there's a trailer appropriation bill, then yes, there would be a reduction in their budget to match the transfer.
Thank you. For debate on the motion, second time. Hearing none, with the good lady from 34 care to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the questions from this body. It is an important part of the legislative process to be able to go back and forth and to have this kind of discussion to clarify where we're at when it comes to policy. As I stated when I opened this debate, I am under no illusions that this particular piece of legislation solves the problem that we have as it relates to health and welfare and the foster care system. But I'm also under no illusions that we can do nothing. This legislation accomplishes 2 critical objectives. It provides a fair hearing for those who are within the system to have their complaints heard and reviewed. The second piece is it begins to give us the structure to understand what does need to change within the department. I appreciate the desire to go in and just start firing individuals who have not lived up to the expectations that we have. I get it. But that doesn't change the underlying system. If you want long-term success, you have to go in and deal with the structure of what you're trying to fix, not just the individuals within it. This office creates a pathway for us to better understand the structure, what's working, what's not, and then we can begin to have an idea what policy needs to look like going forward to create long-term improvement. I ask this body to pursue this office, not for the purposes of removing any accountability from the department or giving them a free pass, but for the exact opposite. To ensure that those who are within the department, who we have given the responsibility of taking care of these children, to know you will be held to account. And if you don't live up to the statutes and to the rules that we have in the state of Idaho when it comes to foster care, that you run the risk of having to answer for those actions when you decide to color outside the lines. These children and these families deserve to have their complaints heard in a way that will not lead to retribution. The current system does not allow for that. We owe it to them to give them a venue to be heard without fear. I ask for your green light.
Thank you. Debate is closed. Question is, shall Senate Bill 1380 pass the House? Clerk will lock machine and the members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Clow, Gannon. Does any member wish to change their vote? Clerk will lock machine and record the roll. 50 ayes, 20 nays. The majority haven't voted in favor of Senate Bill 1380. Senate Bill 1380 is passed the House. Is there a correction to title?
No correction to title.
None. Title's approved. Bill will be transferred to the Senate. Gentlemen.
Okay, I just want to give you my thoughts on this. Right now, there's a lot of abuse of children, and, you know, it's rampant. For example, I was abused by a scoutmaster in an LDS Church in Augusta, Georgia, when I was 13 years old. It really goofed me up, you know, for a while, until I, you know, discovered girls and everything, and I was okay. I didn't know there were men like this. And to have an ombudsman, you know, if there is abuse or something, and have an ombudsman who doesn't, only reports to the governor, to the executive branch, and bypasses the department of that's responsible for welfare of children. That is similar to what happened at Island Park Scout Camp, where there was a sexual predator who abused 150 boys. And the boys would report it, and then they would report it to their bishop, and the bishop would call a set of lawyers in Salt Lake City who did nothing. And it continued on. There's a video called the Church in the Fourth Estate. And I think this is just another way to provide an agency outside the Department of Welfare to scoop it under the rug with only the governor knowing about it, and that's it. And that's not right. So, my opinion, I don't think it's a really good thing to have a person that is outside an agency, the Department of Welfare, and report directly to an ombudsman who reports directly to the governor of the state of Idaho. One man.